Howdy folks, good afternoon, how are we all doing? It is Wednesday, August 18th, 2021, and I'm over by the town of Venice, Florida, and we're actually at a famous spot, which is the famous Venice Jetty. So essentially what is in front of me here is a confluence of three separate watersheds. So one of them is called the Cowpen Slough. Another one is a bit further up north, all the way in Sarasota. Give me actually a second, you guys. Yeah, so the other one is Modern Donna Bay Watershed and the Historic Donna Bay Watershed. So all that water eventually has to make its way down. And here they're basically talking about how they're trying to restore the watershed in general, as they are trying to control the amount of fresh water that comes through here. Because that's the thing. In a brackish water type of habitat, if you have too much fresh water, that's bound to impact any of the species that already reside there, whether it be the oysters, crabs, juvenile fish, and even manatees too. So, for those of you who aren't really sure what a jetty is, well, we're essentially looking at it right now. Right now I'm on the North Jetty side, and then that is the South Jetty. They're basically man-made structures which protrude out into the sea. And usually, you may be wondering, like, why do they really have jetties here? Well, most of the time it's used for erosion control. Now, usually these man-made structures are built completely out of rock, as you can see. And usually there's a bit of pavement along the top, because most times jetties are a very favorable fishing area too, as it is practically right out by the sea. But you could definitely tell that there is a bit of a strong current right now. So typically, with a little more terminology, so right now you could say that there's a little bit of an ebb tide happening, which basically means the tide is going out into the sea. But then you have something called a flow tide, which is basically the opposite, where water actually comes in. Oftentimes, though, you have both of those currents going on at once, and thus there's a lot of turbulence that will be right here in the jetty. But oftentimes the jetty is here because when you go out to the sea, there's something called a longshore current. And typically, this longshore current that I speak of, it runs directly parallel to the coastline. And usually it flows from the north going towards the south. It's a way of bringing sand to new locations. However, though, there's a particular disadvantage, though, when it comes to jetties. For one thing, as you can see, the side that I'm on, there's a lot more sand accumulation. Or, for a more technical term, accretion. Sand accretion. But then, if you were to go on the other side of the jetty, you would see that there is a lot less sand that it looks a bit more eroded on that side. You could say that the beach line on that side is slowly regressing, or receding, not regressing, receding. Think of an analogy of a receding hairline, right? So the hairline slowly goes further and further back. Well, the same analogy applies to what's happening on the beach on the other end. Now, jetties are, somewhat of a, they're kind of like a medium grade erosion control method, but they're not exactly the best measure either. But typically, from what I've read anyways, when it comes to erosion control practices, one of the most sustainable ones I've read is having native vegetation planted. Because when you have the native vegetation, whether it be mangroves or seagrass, anything you can think of, that actually in a sense can slow down the currents coming from the sea and even our rivers. I mean, you come to think of it, that's probably how it used to be at this particular section. But jetties were believed at the time that they were one of the most effective means. But yeah, unfortunately I'm seeing some dead fish washed up ashore. Wow, it is a toasty one though. Yep. That's basically a run through of really what jetties do, in terms of their purpose. But yeah. So I'm sure many of you have seen these in the past as well. It's alright, you guys. Hey, I hope you all learned something of value, like what jetties are really for, and what can be an effective means of providing a more sustainable solution. And, planting this native vegetation that I speak of is actually a bit cheaper too than having a whole jetty being built here. So, alright you guys, hope all of you enjoy your Wednesday, and once again, journey on a journey is outwards. Take care, folks.